الهدى يا شهر
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد. اللهم اقسم لنا من خشيتك ما تحول به بيننا وبين معاصيك، ومن طاعتك ما تبلغنا به جنتك، ومن اليقين ما تهون به علينا مصائب الدنيا. اللهم متعنا بأسماعنا وأبصارنا وقوتنا ما أحييتنا، واجعله الوارث منا، واجعل ثأرنا على من ظلمنا، وانصرنا على من عادانا. اللهم لا تجعل مصيبتنا في ديننا، ولا تجعل الدنيا أكبر همنا ولا مبلغ علمنا، ولا تسلط علينا من لا يخافك ولا يرحمنا. وصل اللهم وسلم على سيدنا محمد، والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك أن تجعل نياتنا صافية لوجهك، وأن تيسر لنا الخير أينما كنا وحيثما توجهنا، إنك على كل شيء قدير. لله تعالى. Inshallah, with the help of Allah, we will continue from where we left off in our explanation of the text of Al-Qadi Abu Shuja. May Allah have mercy upon him. فكنا تكلمنا عن الشرائط للتيمم، ووصلنا إلى الشرط الخامس، وهو التراب الطاهر الذي له غبار. وهكذا في مذهب الإمام الشافعي رضي الله تعالى عنه وأرضاه. So in the last session we were speaking about the conditions of tayammum, the dry purification, and we reached the fifth condition, which is to use soil which is pure and dusty. And this is the madhab of al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala wa radiyallahu anhu. أما في مذهب الإمام مالك وأبي حنيفة رضي الله تعالى عنهما، إنه يجوز بجميع أنواع الأرض حتى بالصخرة. In the madhab of al-Imam Malik ibn Anas and al-Imam Abi Hanifa al-Nu'man, may Allah accept both of their deeds, it is valid to use any type of earth, including stones. However, according to Ash-Shafi'i, this is not valid for tayammum. فقال القاضي أبو شجاع فإن خالطه جس أو رمل لم يجزي. So Al-Qadi Abu Shuja, he says, if the soil was mixed with gypsum or sand, then it is not valid. فلا يصح التيمم بتراب مخلوط بدقيق وزعفران ونحوه ولو كان الخليط قليلا على الصحيح لأنه مانع من وصول التراب إلى العضو. So if the soil was mixed with a fine material like sand or gypsum or saffron or the like, even if it was mixed only slightly, this is not valid in the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i radiyallahu ta'ala anhu wa ardah, according to what is correct. Because this additional material in the soil will prevent the soil from reaching the organ that needs to be wiped. However, if there was a piece of wood, for example, or a small stone, a pebble, then this would not have any effect. Because when one is wiping, these things would roll off or they would fall off the hand after striking, or they would not even cling to the hand when one strikes the soil. As for the fine particles of substances that is mixed, they would also cling to the hand just as the soil would, and that substance would be wiped over the face as opposed to the soil. So one part of the face or the hands would be wiped with soil, another part with the other substance. So this would render the tayammum invalid. ثم قال, then Al-Qadi Abu Shuja rahimahullah, he says, وَفَرَائِضُهُ أَرْبَعَةُ أَشْيَاء. He said the obligations of tayammum are four things. أحدها, the first of them, النية لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنما الأعمال بالنيات. So the first the first obligation of tayammum is the intention. And this is based, as we have mentioned numerous times prior to this, the saying of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that the deeds are according to the intentions. وَلِأَنَّهُ عِبَارَةٌ مُفْتَقِرَةٌ إِلَى النِّيَّةِ كَالصَّلَاةِ وَالْوُضُوءِ. And this intention is needed for a tayammum, just as it is needed for the prayer and wudu and the like, because performing tayammum is an act of worship that depends upon an intention, a valid intention. فينوي المتيمم استباحة الصلاة أو نحوها مما يفتقر إلى طهارة. So the one who is performing tayammum would intend to make the prayer permissible or the like from the things that require purification. And if one was making tayammum in order to make tawaf around the Kaaba, or one was making tayammum in order to carry the mushaf, a book of the Quran, then they would intend to make tawaf permissible, or they would intend to make carrying or touching the mushaf permissible. ولا يكفي أن ينوي رفع الحدث. And it is not enough for one to intend to remove or lift the ritual impurity. لأن المتيمم لا يرفع حدثه إجماعا. This is because the one who is performing tayammum does not lift his ritual impurity by consensus. As we said, that tayammum has the meaning of tahara, but it does not actually lift the ritual impurity. ويجب قرن النية بنقل التراب وبمسح شيء من الوجه. And it is an obligation for this intention to be accompanied with the transferring of the soil and the wiping of the face. Which means if one took soil and then they lifted their hands from the soil without having the intention of tayammum, or they had the intention when they lifted their hands, but then their intention left their heart. So when they wiped their face, they did not have an intention, or the intention left during the transfer. Because they got distracted, their mind became absent to what they were doing, and they became preoccupied with something else. So they lost their intention. This is not valid. They must be conscious, aware of what they are doing from the lifting of their hands, the transferring of the soil, until they start to wipe a part of their face. ولا يجوز أن تتأخر النية عن أول مفروض وأول أفعاله المفروضة نقل التراب. And it is not permissible to delay making the intention after the first obligation. And the first act, which is obligatory when one is making tayammum, is the transferring of the soil. The transferring of the soil. So if one put their hands in the soil, then they lifted their hands without an intention to make tayammum, this is not valid. So even if after they lifted their hands, prior to their hands reaching their face, they made an intention, this is not valid. والمراد بالنقل الضرب. And what is meant by the transferring of the soil is the striking, one hitting their hands into the soil. فلا بد من النية قبل رفع يديه من التراب. So it is necessary that one have the intention, the proper intention, before lifting their hands from the soil. So even if they had an intention prior to lifting their hands from the soil, but that intention was an invalid intention, they intended to lift the ritual impurity, this is invalid, because the tayammum does not lift the ritual impurity. So they must have a proper, valid intention prior to lifting their hands. والثاني, the second integral, مسح الوجه, is wiping the face. لقوله تعالى فامسحوا بوجوهكم وأيديكم. And this is based on the saying of Allah, exalted is He. Then wipe your faces and your hands. وتجب ضربتان فلا يجزئ التيمم بضربة واحدة وإن أمكن استيعاب أعضائه بها. And it is an obligation for one to strike the soil twice. For one to strike the soil twice. To transfer soil twice. So even if there was enough soil with one strike, with one transfer to wipe the hands and the face, this is not sufficient. One must do it twice. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم التيمم ضربتان ضربة للوجه. And this is based on the saying of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم that التيمم, the dry purification, is 2 strikes, 2 transfers of soil. 1 strike for the face. وكما قلنا الضرب عبارة عن النقل. And as we said, the striking of the soil is an expression of the transferring of the soil from its source to the face or to the hands. والثالث, the third condition, كما قال القاضي أبو شجاع مسح اليدين مع المرفقين. It is the wiping of the hands up along with the elbows. لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم التيمم ضربتان. The dry purification is 2 strikes. ضربة للوجه, 1 strike for the face. وضربة لليدين إلى المرفقين, and 1 strike for the hands up to and including the elbows. وروى هذا الحاكم. This hadith was narrated by Al-Hakim rahimahullah ta'ala. والرابع, the 4th condition, الترتيب, the order. فيجب تقديم مسح الوجه على مسح اليدين. And so it is an obligation for one to wipe their face with soil before wiping their hands. سواء تيمم عن حدث أصغر أو أكبر, regardless of whether one is making tayammum as a replacement for making wudu or as a replacement for making ghusl, regardless of whether it was due to the minor ritual impurity or the major ritual impurity. One must wipe their face before wiping their hands. وَسُنَنُهُ, Al-Qadi Abu Shuja, may Allah have mercy upon him, he says, وَسُنَنُهُ, and its recommendations, أي التيمم, the recommendations of tayammum, ثلاثة أشياء, are three things. أولها, the first of them, التسمية, saying بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, ولو لجنب وحائض, even if the one who is making tayammum was junub, or they are making tayammum due to having a wet dream or due to sexual intercourse, or they're making tayammum due to the termination of the menstrual cycle, it is recommended for them to say the basmala. وَثَانِيهَا, and the third of them is تَقْدِيمُ الْيُمْنَى, giving priority or wiping the right min al-yadayn, from of the hands, ala al-yusra, before wiping the left. So wiping the right hand up to and including the elbows prior to wiping wiping the right hand up to and including the elbows prior to wiping the left hand. فَتَقْدِيمُ الْيُمْنَى مِنَ الْيَدَيْنِ عَلَى الْيُسْرَى مِنْهُمَا, وَتَقْدِيمُ أَعْلَى الْوَجْهِ عَلَى أَسْفَلِهِ, and it is also recommended that one would wipe the top part of their face before wiping the bottom part of their face. وَثَالِثُهَا, and the third recommendation, al-muwalah, is the continuity. وَسَبَقَ مَعْنَاهَا فِي الْوُضُوء, and we already explained this in the chapter of wudu. وَتَكُونُ بِتَقْدِيمِ التُّرَابِ مَاءً هُنَا. Now one, in this case, is using soil, which is dry, to wipe, not water. So how would one estimate this continuity? One would do so assuming that, or approximating, if this was water that one was using, how long would it take for the organs to dry under normal circumstances? One having a normal body temperature, one being on a day in which the weather is moderate, it's not very cold, it's not very hot, the wind is not blowing a lot, and thus the drying would be sped up or prolonged. So one would estimate as if one was using water. وإلى هنا وبالله التوفيق. Inshallah, we will stop here for today, and we will continue inshallah tomorrow and cover the invalidators of tayammum and other matters that relate to it. اللهم سامحنا واعف عنا واجعل القرآن ربيع قلوبنا ونورا لأبصارنا وجوارحنا يا أرحم الراحمين واغفر لنا يا ربي فإننا مؤمنون. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات وبارك الله بكم وأحسن الله إليكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
يا شهر الخيرات والإحسان والبركات يا رمضان